I never thought silence could be so loud. The moment I stepped inside, the absence of sound felt like a scream. The house was hollow, stripped of everything that had once made it a home. No scent of Laura's lavender candles, no quiet hum of the radio she always left on, no scattered shoes by the door, just an empty, lifeless space. I stood there, gripping my keys, my breath uneven. I knew this moment was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. It didn't make the weight in my chest any lighter. I walked through the house slowly, taking in what was left. The couch was gone. The photos had been ripped from the walls, leaving behind small, empty hooks. Even the kitchen felt abandoned. Drawers half open, a single coffee mug left on the counter, as if she had taken one last sip before walking away forever. I exhaled shakily and reached for my phone. The last message from Laura stared back at me. It was just a mistake. You're overreacting. A mistake. That's what she called it. But it wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, a deliberate, calculated decision to throw away everything we had built, to invite someone else into what was supposed to be ours. I set my phone down and rubbed my face. My mind kept replaying the night I found out, over and over, like a cruel film on repeat. I had been at work late, finishing a project that I had promised myself I'd complete before the weekend. Laura had texted me earlier in the day, saying she was heading out with some friends. That wasn't unusual. She had a life outside of our marriage, and I never thought twice about trusting her. But something had felt off. Maybe it was the way she had been acting lately, more distant, more guarded. Maybe it was how quickly she had shut down our conversations, always with a reassuring smile and, "You're just overthinking." I had almost ignored my gut feeling that night. Almost. But something inside me wouldn't let it go. So, on my way home, I made a decision that changed everything. I drove past the bar where she said she'd be, and that's when I saw her. Not with her friends, not in a casual, friendly conversation, but wrapped in someone else's arms, laughing, leaning into him like I had never existed, like our life together had been nothing more than a placeholder until something more exciting came along. The moment I saw her hand on his chest, the way he pulled her closer without hesitation, something inside me cracked. I didn't confront her. I didn't cause a scene. I just drove home, and I started packing. Now, standing in the aftermath of what used to be my life, I felt empty. Not angry, not even heartbroken, just exhausted. She would be back soon. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Not an argument, not a fight, just an empty house and a truth she could never take back. I sat in the quiet, staring at the empty walls, trying to understand how I had arrived at this moment. The house no longer felt like mine. It was just a shell now, stripped of everything that had once made it feel like a home. There was no warmth left, no history, just echoes of a life that no longer existed. I wasn't naive. I knew marriages weren't perfect, but I had believed in ours. I had believed that after everything we had been through, job changes, financial struggles, long nights supporting each other's dreams, there was an unspoken promise that we would always choose each other, that no matter how tempting the outside world became, we would stay loyal, that the years we spent building something together meant more than a fleeting moment of excitement with a stranger. Laura had shattered that belief in one night. The last few weeks had been full of warning signs, but I had been too blind, too trusting, too unwilling to believe that the woman I had loved for over a decade was capable of betraying me so carelessly. I replayed the moment I had seen her at the bar, her body pressed against another man's as if I had never existed, the way she had laughed, completely at ease in his presence, completely comfortable in her betrayal. And then the message she had sent me after I confronted her. It was just a mistake. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I wondered how many times people had used that word to dismiss the pain they caused, as if a betrayal was just a minor inconvenience, something that could be brushed aside with an apology and a promise that it would never happen again. As if the years I had devoted to her could be undone with a simple, "I didn't mean to." But it wasn't just the act itself that broke me. It was the way she had chosen to handle it. She hadn't been remorseful. She hadn't even seemed particularly upset when I confronted her. Instead, she had acted as though I was the one making things worse, as though my hurt and anger were unreasonable. I had expected tears, regret, maybe even a desperate plea to fix things. Instead, she had rolled her eyes and sighed. "It didn't mean anything, Orson. You're blowing this out of proportion." She had dismissed me so easily, as if I was nothing more than an obstacle to her fun. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to fight for. So I made a choice. While she was out, I packed my bags. But I didn't stop there. I emptied my drawers, removed my clothes from the closet, took the few things that mattered to me. My grandfather's watch, my books, my camera. Everything else I left. The house could be hers. The furniture, the dishes, the decorations we had picked out together. It could all stay because none of it meant anything anymore. I went to our safe and took my important documents. My birth certificate, my passport, the deed to my car. I transferred my money into a new account she didn't have access to. I called my landlord and told him I wouldn't be renewing the lease. I even left a note. Nothing long, nothing emotional. Just 6 simple words. "You made your choice. Now live with it." By the time I finished, I felt nothing. No sadness, no rage, just an eerie sense of finality, as if I had already grieved the loss of my marriage and was simply tying up loose ends. Lorna would be back soon. She would walk through that door expecting everything to be the same. She would call out my name, maybe even expect an argument, another chance to justify herself. Instead, she would find emptiness. And she would know, without a doubt, that this time there was no fixing what she had broken. Laura came home an hour later. I had imagined this moment in my head 100 times, playing out the different ways she might react, but nothing could have prepared me for the actual scene. The sound of her heels echoed in the hallway as she stepped inside, the usual careless jingle of her keys landing in the bowl by the door. Then silence. I knew exactly what she was seeing. The absence of my jacket on the hook, the missing shoes from the entryway, the gaps on the bookshelf where my things used to be. She took a few steps inside, and then I heard it. The sharp intake of breath, the hesitation in her footsteps. She hadn't noticed the full extent of it yet. Then her voice, hesitant at first. "Orson." Silence. She stepped deeper into the house. I imagined her reaching for the light switch, her eyes scanning the barren space where our couch had been. The kitchen table was still there, but my chair was gone. The framed photos of us, weddings, vacations, silly moments, had disappeared from the walls. Her breathing grew uneven. "Orson." Her voice cracked slightly. Still nothing. And then, the moment of realization. I heard the sharp inhale, the hurried steps as she moved from room to room. She was checking, confirming what she already suspected. She would find my drawers empty, my closet stripped bare, my bathroom shelf cleared out. The house was still hers, but I was no longer part of it. Then I heard the sound I had been waiting for. The rustling of paper as she found the note I left on the kitchen counter. "You made your choice. Now live with it." For a long time there was nothing. No movement, no sound. Then, slowly, she exhaled. I could picture it. Her standing there, reading those words over and over, processing the reality of what she had done. And then, the first crack in her facade. I didn't expect sobs, and I didn't get them. What I heard instead was frustration. A shaky exhale followed by the sound of her tossing the note aside. A scoff, almost, as if she was trying to convince herself this wasn't happening. But it was. She pulled out her phone. I imagined her opening our texts, scrolling up, looking for signs that I had planned this. Maybe she checked my location, expecting me to be at a bar or at a friend's house, waiting for her to come crawling back. Maybe she thought this was some sort of bluff. I knew what she would find. Nothing. I had blocked her before I even walked out the door. I sat in my car outside, watching from a distance, unseen. I had no interest in confrontation, no desire to hear excuses or empty apologies. I had heard enough already. I had heard her tell me it was just a mistake. I had heard her try to justify her betrayal as if it was nothing more than a lapse in judgment. But the truth was, it hadn't been a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the grocery store. A mistake is taking the wrong exit on the highway. What she had done was a choice, a conscious decision to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She paced in front of the window now, her phone pressed to her ear. Calling me, maybe, but I wouldn't answer. Not now, not ever. I waited, watching as the weight of her action settled in. Took a few minutes before she stopped pacing, her shoulders sinking slightly. Reality had set in. I had truly left, and for the first time since she decided to betray me, she was the one left standing in an empty house. I didn't drive away immediately. Part of me wanted to disappear and never look back. But another part, the one that had spent over a decade building a life with this woman, wanted to see it happen. I needed to see the exact moment she realized that I was truly gone. From my car, I watched through the living room window as she stood there, unmoving. The phone was still pressed to her ear, and I could imagine the emotions racing through her mind. Maybe she thought I would pick up after a few more tries. Maybe she believed I was still somewhere nearby, cooling off, just waiting for her to say the right words so we could pretend none of this had happened. She had always been good at convincing herself of things that weren't true. I could see her fingers clenching the phone tighter now, her jaw tensed, her lips forming words I couldn't hear. Was she leaving me a voicemail, cursing me under her breath, telling herself that this was my fault for reacting too harshly? It didn't matter. Nothing she could say would change the truth. This was all on her. Then, after a moment, she seemed to snap. She yanked the phone away from her ear and threw it onto the couch. She started pacing, running her hands through her hair, exhaling sharp, frustrated breaths. She was unraveling. I had spent years deciphering her moods. I knew the exact difference between her angry pacing and her panicked pacing. This wasn't just anger. This was something deeper. Reality was catching up to her. I watched as she grabbed the note I had left, the one she had scoffed at just minutes earlier, and reread it. This time, I saw her shoulders drop. Her fingers curled around the paper, gripping it as if squeezing hard enough might undo what she had done. But she didn't crumble it up. She didn't throw it away. She just stood there, staring at those 6 words, letting them sink in. You made your choice. Now live with it. And she would. I could have left then. I should have. But I didn't. I wanted to see what she would do next. She finally moved, slowly, carefully, like her body was just catching up with what her mind had finally processed. She turned, scanning the room as if truly seeing it for the first time since stepping inside, seeing what was missing, feeling the weight of the emptiness. Her hands twitched at her sides. Then suddenly she moved. She rushed to the bedroom. Even from my car, I could hear the sound of drawers being yanked open, hangers being pushed aside. She was looking for my things, hoping, praying, that maybe I had only taken a few essentials, that maybe I was just staying somewhere else for the night. But she would find nothing. Her movements grew more frantic. She checked the closet, the bathroom, even the laundry hamper. When she found nothing, she stopped. Just stopped. I watched as she braced herself against the dresser, her head hanging low. She was finally feeling it. The absence. She hadn't expected this. She had expected me to be angry. Sure. Maybe even yell, demand answers, fight for the marriage she had so casually thrown away. She had expected confrontation, maybe even ultimatums. But she hadn't expected me to be done. She hadn't expected to walk into an empty house and realize she had been the one left behind. For once, I didn't feel like the one who had lost something. I started the engine. She didn't hear it. She was too busy standing in the wreckage of what she had done, too lost in the weight of her own choices. And as I pulled away from what used to be my home, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. The first night away should have felt strange. But it didn't. I had expected to lie awake, drowning in the weight of what had happened. But instead, I slept better than I had in months. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was knowing that I had finally reclaimed control of my own life. Either way, I woke up feeling lighter. I had checked into a short-term rental a few towns over. It wasn't much, just a small, furnished apartment with the basics, but it was mine. No reminders of her, no memories clawing at my chest. Just a blank slate. Exactly what I needed. By the time I finally checked my phone, I wasn't surprised to see the notifications piling up. Missed calls, unread messages, all from Lorna. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew what they would say. First, she would have been dismissive, annoyed. Are you serious? You're acting insane. Call me back. Then, when she realized I wasn't responding, the tone would have changed. Orson, please just talk to me. This isn't how we fix things. And finally, when she saw that I had truly left, the desperation would have kicked in. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to losing. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled through my emails, checked my bank account, double-checked that all the important documents were where they needed to be. I had taken care of everything before I left. Moved my money, changed my passwords, contacted my lawyer. Lorna would wake up today realizing that she had no way to reach me. She had made her choices. Now she was going to have to sit with them. As I set my phone down, my mind drifted back to the house. Had she slept there last night, alone in the emptiness she had created? Had she tried to call her friends, only to realize that none of them would understand why I had left without a word? Would she try to justify it to them, tell them it was just a misunderstanding? Or would she finally admit, if only to herself, that this was exactly what she had earned? I got dressed and headed out for the day. I had no real plans, just the need to be anywhere but stuck inside my own thoughts. The coffee shop I found was small, quiet, the kind of place I never had time for before. I ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and let the world move around me. It was strange, this feeling of freedom. Even though I had just walked away from a life I had spent over a decade building, I didn't feel lost. I felt relieved. And then the first call came. Not from Lorna, from a mutual friend. I let it go to voicemail. Then another and another. I frowned. Something was happening. By the fourth call, curiosity got the better of me. I played the voicemail. Orson, man, I don't know if you've seen, but Laura's been posting all over social media. She's making it seem like you just up and left for no reason. She's telling people you had a meltdown and abandoned her, that she's blindsided. You need to set the record straight. I exhaled slowly. Of course, she wouldn't take responsibility. Of course, she wouldn't tell the truth. Lorna had always been good at spinning the narrative, painting herself as the victim in every situation. I could already picture the posts, some vague, emotional caption about betrayal and heartbreak, a carefully curated photo of her looking devastated. The comments filled with sympathy from people who had no idea what had actually happened. She wasn't crying because she had lost me. She was crying because she had lost control of the situation. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. There was a time when I would have rushed to defend myself, to make sure everyone knew the truth. But now I didn't care. Let her talk. Let her spin her story. Because soon enough, the truth would unravel all on its own. I didn't check her social media. I didn't need to. I knew exactly how Lorna operated. She was never one to sit in silence and accept blame. No, she needed an audience, people to comfort her, to tell her that she was the real victim here. She would spin her story carefully, omitting details, exaggerating others, painting me as the unstable one. I could already imagine her posts. Some people just give up on love instead of fighting for it. I never thought I'd be abandoned like this. Maybe she even added a sad selfie, a tear rolling down her cheek, the kind of thing that made people rush to comment, "You deserve better, Queen." The irony of it all. I didn't care what she said. Let her cry to the internet. Let her paint me as the villain. The truth had a way of revealing itself, and I had no intention of playing into her game. I spent the rest of the day distracting myself, going to the gym, grabbing dinner, even catching a late-night movie alone. It was strange, this newfound solitude, but it wasn't unwelcome. I had been in a marriage where I was the one making all the sacrifices, where I was the one who always had to be understanding, forgiving, patient. Now, for the first time in years, I didn't have to answer to anyone. But just as I was about to fall asleep that night, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You should know what she's telling people." I stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "You don't know me, but I know Lorna, and I know she's lying." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Another message. Check your email. I just sent you something. You need to see this. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over my screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to move on, to not let myself get dragged back into whatever mess Lorna was creating. But my curiosity won out. I opened my laptop, logged into my email, and saw a new message from an unfamiliar address. The subject line sent a chill down my spine. The truth about Lorna. I clicked it, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Screenshots, conversations, photos, proof. Lorna hadn't just been lying about me. She had been lying about everything. She wasn't just playing the victim. She was actively rewriting history, telling people I had become paranoid, that I was emotionally abusive, that I had left her in a fit of rage because I couldn't handle the fact that she had made one little mistake. She had twisted the narrative so much that even people I had once called friends were starting to believe it. But the messages in this email, they told a very different story. One conversation caught my attention immediately. A message thread between Lorna and her actual affair partner, the same man I had seen her with at the bar that night. He finally left, she had texted him. I didn't even have to try. He walked right out, just like we planned. I reread the words over and over, feeling my pulse in my ears. She had planned this. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a drunken lapse in judgment. She had wanted me to find out. She had wanted me to leave, had orchestrated everything so that she could play the victim while walking away guilt-free. And now she was out there pretending to be heartbroken while laughing behind my back. I closed my laptop, my hand shaking. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming next. The hours bled together as I stared at my screen, my mind racing. The weight of what I had just uncovered pressed down on me, heavier than anything I had ever felt. Lorna hadn't just fallen into an affair. She had engineered my exit from our marriage. Every word she had spoken in those messages, every carefully placed lie she had told our friends, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. She had wanted me gone. Not because she was trapped, not because she had been struggling with guilt, but because it was easier for her. She wanted to be the one left standing in the wreckage with a sympathetic crowd, while I was cast as the bitter, unhinged ex. She had played her cards with precision, setting up the moment where she could claim innocence, where she could be the one receiving comfort instead of accountability. But what she hadn't accounted for was me finding out. I had left without a fight because I didn't think she was worth one. I had walked away because I had nothing left to say. But now, with the truth in my hands, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I shut my laptop and exhaled slowly, trying to steal the anger bubbling inside me. I wasn't going to lash out. I wasn't going to scream or confront her like she probably expected me to. That would give her exactly what she wanted, proof that I was the irrational, reactive one. Instead, I was going to let the truth do what it always did. I was going to let it spread. My first call was to my lawyer. I had already taken precautions before I left, moved my finances, locked her out of anything tied to me. But now, I wanted to make sure she couldn't sink her claws into anything else. I explained everything in detail, down to the last text message I had been sent, and by the time I hung up, the final nails in the coffin of my marriage were being hammered in place. Next, I forwarded the screenshots to a few key people in our social circle. Not in a dramatic, vengeful way, just enough to plant the seed of doubt in the minds of the people she had manipulated. I didn't need to tell anyone the truth. I just needed to show them. And once people started talking, once they started questioning, her entire performance would start to fall apart. Then I blocked her number. I had no interest in hearing whatever desperate excuse she'd come up with once she realized I had flipped the script. Whatever she had planned next, it no longer mattered. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control again. I walked outside, letting the cold air bite at my skin, grounding myself in the reality of my new life. I was done grieving what I had lost. I was done wondering what I could have done differently. There was no fixing something that had been rotten from the inside. And as I stood there, watching the sun rise over the unfamiliar streets of my new city, I realized something. I wasn't just walking away from Lorna. I was walking towards something better. The strangest part about hitting rock bottom is that, eventually, you realize there's nowhere left to fall. And once you accept that, something incredible happens. You stop looking down. You stop thinking about the past, about what you lost, about the person who betrayed you. Instead, you start looking forward. You start seeing the future. It had been 3 weeks since I left Lorna and our so-called life behind. In that time, I had gone from feeling like my world had imploded to realizing that it had simply opened up. For the first time in years, I wasn't trapped in someone else's story. I wasn't living my life in reaction to someone else's choices. I was free. The fallout from my departure had been exactly what I expected. Once the truth about Lorna's lies started to spread, her carefully crafted narrative collapsed in on itself. I didn't have to say anything. People figured it out on their own. The messages she had sent, the ones where she laughed about how she had planned my exit, had made their way back to people she hadn't expected to see them. The sympathy she had soaked up turned into whispers behind her back. The friends who had rushed to console her started keeping their distance. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was furious, that she had tried to double down, claiming I was the manipulative one, that it was all some misunderstanding. But no one was buying it anymore. And I had never cared less. I was too busy rediscovering myself. I found a new place, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I started picking up old hobbies I had neglected, spent time reconnecting with friends who actually mattered. I even took up running, something I used to do before my life had been consumed by Lorna's expectations and excuses. For the first time in years, I was making choices for me and I was happy. One evening, as I sat on my apartment's small balcony, sipping a beer and watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Lorna was just a chapter in my story. A long one, a painful one, but just that, a chapter. And I had finally turned the page. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, a message from an old friend. "Let's grab a drink this weekend. It's been too long." I smiled. Yeah, it was time to start living again.